Speaking of grizzly bears.
Yeah, Grizzlies star John Morant found his name in the headlines today by way of Howard Beck, who I'm going to clear this up with him because he's supposed to come on the show here in the next couple of weeks. This is the quote from Howard Beck. I'm constantly checking in with executives around trade deadline, around like, okay, what we saw, what we didn't see, what's next. And in this league, you're always on the lookout for the next wave of stars that are going to get dealt, right? Somebody out of the blue said, keep an eye on John Morant this summer. I'm just saying it's one of those things I'm kind of keeping an eye on if it were to flame out early, or if they were to flame out early, they being the Memphis Grizzlies. And my theory on what's going on there, and we're going to talk about this, and then, I think this kind of gives us a good segue into how I think the Lakers are going to come by their second star. And then on the back half of the show, we'll talk about the second half of the season expectations. Also subscribe, rate, review, blah, blah, blah. All right. So my thoughts on this were that this is a result of the CBA and how it used to be, right, Harrison? It used to be your best player and your second best player were just maxed out. That was just, it didn't matter how good your team was.
It was just what you did. Yeah.
It was just like status quo, modus operandi. It was,
we can't afford to upset these guys, so we have to max them.
Right. And so, and that's how it was for decades, the entirety basically of the time that I followed the NBA. That's how it went. There was barely even any negotiation. It was like, all right, what's the max that we can give Powell? That's what Powell was getting. And that was on like a really, really good team. That's how you arrive at like Bradley Beal having some of the worst contract situations in the history of the sport, is because
I would say that's more of a development of like the 2010s almost, is like where just everyone gets a max. It doesn't matter. Like if you're a franchise player, you are a high draft pick, you can't insult them. You have to give them the max.
Right. Well, the reason I use Bradley Beal as the example here is because he was the second best player on those John Wall, Bradley Beal teams.
Yeah.
And he just always got the max. And like, it was just like, that's how. And there was no negotiation.
When he was the best player on terrible Wizards teams, they're like, you're going to be our Kobe. And then they maxed him out, gave him a no trade clause, and then traded him the next year.
Yeah, right. And so I think with this new CBA and what has become, in essence, a hard cap, you have MPJ, a great example, Bashir. A $40 million contract to MPJ that was signed in the previous CBA, because back then you just gave those contracts out. Yeah. That's how it went.
It's just like, we can't afford to upset him. Someone else will offer it to him. And so like, we can't risk losing him for nothing. And now there's more of a calculus of like, is it better to lose someone for nothing versus to pay them this amount of money? And you're seeing a lot of teams do that calculus. Brandon Ingram getting moved at the deadline because basically the Pelicans decided that's not worth it.
Luka,
like to some degree, Luka. On the higher end, where the Mavs are just like, we don't trust this guy to stay healthy on a max contract, so we're trading him. And whether you think that's insane or not, most people clearly do. That is the calculus that is leading to a lot of these decisions.
Well, and that's how. Well, I want to back up a quick second here. Teams looked at this new CBA and how strict it is at like the second apron, which is now basically a hard cap for the vast majority of the teams.
I think probably.
Well, I think eventually it'll be 30, because we've seen how it's gone for Phoenix. I think
the teams that have blasted through it, not exactly like making great argument to do that as a strategy.
Like you have the Celtics who blasted right through it and they won a championship as a result. But I bet you there are so many owners who are looking at Phoenix and it's like, thank God that has gone so disastrously.
Matt Ishbia plant from the owners to show fans that they're like, all right, buddy, this is your new owner hazing ritual. You just got to destroy your team for like 10 years and we'll approve your buyership. And then that way fans are like, well, we don't want you to spend all this money because look at what happened when Matt Ishbia
look at what happened over there. Yeah. I bet Matt Ishbia and Jeannie Buss are super popular at the owners meetings at this point. But anyway, so the players, we're seeing this whiplash, right? Where you saw the reaction from all of the stars when Luka got traded. Every single superstar was like, whoa, shit.
Like, how many guys really think that they're better than him? You know, that
Yeah.
like that couldn't happen to them. Like, there's a couple guys that probably think so, and more than are actually better than him, but there's not many. You know,
Yeah.
even a lot of these alpha stars, like if they're being honest in their heart of hearts, are kind of like, oh no.
Yeah. Right. And I think one of the sounds that you heard there was everybody realizing and like texting their agent as quickly as they could, hey, are there going to be no more maxes? Because it used to be under previous CBAs, the greatest market inefficiency was the best player in the league having their contract capped, right? So, like, if you had
not even the best
LeBron,
player, like the best 10 players having
maybe
their
even yeah,
contract. Yeah. Like,
yeah. But like, I mean, I still think like the
yeah.
better the player, the greater
For
the
sure. But I mean,
inefficiency.
like it was an inefficiency for almost everyone who got the max. I mean, not everyone, but most guys, if they could have went out onto the open market, it within that CBA environment where the only penalty was like a dollar for dollar tax. Oh, you know, and you were only restricted by bird rights and those sorts of things. Like, you know, guys were that was a market inefficiency that you could artificially cap LeBron at, you know, $16 million at one point or $20 million or whatever, you know, back in the day.
Yeah, and I think to a certain extent that inefficiency still exists, although I think it's probably going to dissipate because now there are just going to be fewer players who actually get that amount of money, right?
Yeah.
Like now we're going to reach a point here where it used to be 30, maybe like 45, maybe even 60 players would get like the max that they could possibly get every time. Now I think we're going to arrive at a place here where, and by the way, like there would be 60 guys who would get the max that they could possibly sign for, and only about 10 or so of those players actually deserving full on every single penny that you could give that player from purely a basketball standpoint, by the way. I want to be clear.
I'd say under the old CBA, I think it's more than 10. But
yeah, I mean,
just because again, like the only penalty is how much you're willing to pay. You know, like that's really like how much it costs your like it used to be that we would criticize the Lakers for being skinflint, you know, when they would not spend money like to keep someone like Alex Caruso or whatever, because it's like there's literally no basketball reason to not do that. You are just not paying money. And so under that environment, you know, why not just pay for good players? You know, it's like there's more than 10 that are worth that in that environment. Now, I think there's an argument to be made about like how many guys really are actually worth that max when it's so artificially hamstrings you in all these other ways.
Not artificially, actually hamstrings you. It used to artificially. Now it's actually, right?
Yeah, it's like it's a made up rule. They're like, well, we came up with these rules for how we can spend our money. You know, like it's
yeah,
like,
that's fair.
We're like, we are all Randian capitalists in real life, but I don't know about paying these guys $80 million a year.
Yeah,
that seems a little steep to me. I don't like. Can they really be worth it when my team is only worth $6 billion?
Here's what I would say though.
Playing. I mean, really, fans are showing up to buy concessions from me, the owner, right? You know, it's like,
hey, who gets to hold the trophy first when their team wins?
It's my brilliant business mind that created the NBA. You know, it's.
So what I would say though is that, yeah, there were technically maybe 10, 15, 20 is pushing it, guys who were worthy of max contracts before. My only like pushback to that would be there was a reason either Shaq, Kobe, or Duncan were on the championship teams for like 15 years straight.
Yeah.
Because only those guys were like all of those guys had their contracts. Well, Shaq to a lesser degree because he was from a previous non-max contract existence. And then they introduced the max contract.
Well, by the time he got to the Heat, there was a max.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But like I don't think there was a max when he got to the Lakers. I think
No, there was not. There was
He
no.
signed a
I don't.
huge contract.
I think the max contract came into effect. Like it was based. If I remember correctly, it was because of the Kevin Garnett deal the next year. So it wasn't Shaq wasn't the total impetus, but he raised the bar, and then KG got a huge contract, and then they're like, okay, we cannot be doing this. You know, we need to artificially deflate the value of the workforce. Okay.
Well, because where they were heading in their minds was that stars would get $150 million contracts, and there would be no middle class, right?
Yeah.
Which
NBA trickle down economics. I think it's worked out great.
It's worked out everywhere else.
Middle class. I think the NBA's middle class is thriving. You know, it's definitely not like stars and minimums on most.
Every new CBA just does better and better and better. So the anyway, so to bring this back to John Morant, and we're going to see this with every borderline max player, and I think, and to be absolutely clear, this is just from a basketball standpoint, because John Morant, the entity, does make
more than a max,
way more than a max to the Memphis Grizzlies, and LeBron James is worth way more than a max to the Lakers, and so on and so forth. I'm just talking strictly from a basketball. If we were to look at this purely through the term you used, which I think is a good one here, Randian lenses, where we have to like Lonnie Walker, I think is another like kind of as a quick detour. Lonnie Walker's deadline that he needed to be signed by was February 18th. And he was never going to be picked up any earlier than that, because every day that he was in Europe made him a more effective and efficient pickup than if he was picked up months ago, because his contract prorates, and he was always going to sign a prorated minimum contract. And so if anybody was ever going to pick him up, it was going to be at the very last day that they could, because he, every single $10,000 or so was going to bring you closer and closer and closer to that second apron. We saw it earlier
like I
this
always
year.
say, Anthony, what's the most valuable thing for a basketball team? No, not could Lonnie Walker have helped the Sixers sort of stay above water the last couple of weeks. It's how much is Josh Harris paying? And, I'm excited that he got a better deal by waiting 2 weeks. I think that was really prudent.
Well, we saw this earlier in the season with who's the good shooter that the Knicks were like, well, like they literally leaked, we're going to wait a couple weeks. No, Matt Ryan, but it was also, there was a shooting guard who used to play for the Clippers. Shamet. Shamet. Like they literally leaked. Yeah. If we wait like 3 weeks or so, it saves us $500,000.
Yeah, they're like, no, we just drafted him in the G League draft just to sort of stash him there. But yeah, we're going to sign him in a couple weeks when it's cheaper.
Exactly. And all of this is to say, like, if obviously they aren't going to pinch pennies to the same extent with the Jaws of the world and stuff like that, where they're going to wait so long to sign his max or whatever. But I do think I think John Morant is a good example of, weirdly, the Grizzlies aren't significantly worse when he doesn't play. And then on top of it, you had all of the off-court stuff as well. And just purely, again, from a basketball standpoint, the Memphis Grizzlies might be looking at John like, I'm not sure he's worth the max. Like, if we could have John, like, imagine if Nico Harrison, less than the max.
Imagine if Nico Harrison was GM of that team.
I'd be a Laker.
He would have given him a lifetime extension because he's a Nike guy. That is the answer to that.
That's actually true. It's probably. But like, I think somebody like Luka, if we're going to continue with this analysis here, and I know this is very in the weeds and this is very CBA heavy, and this isn't like the most exciting shit, but I promise, stick with us, because how this helps the Lakers is just right around the corner. But because it's already helped the Lakers.
We're only 26 minutes in, okay? Just bear with us another couple.
Thing is, it's already helped the Lakers, and I think it's only going to continue helping the Lakers, because the Lakers lucked out, as the max that they can pay Luka is significantly lower than the max that the Dallas Mavericks could have paid Luka. And then the Mavericks weren't comfortable paying Luka that amount of money. And
he lost what, like $80 to $100 million
I
with
think it's like
that trade?
116 mil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like it's
And
probably, people always like inflate. It's like probably less than that because it's like there's probably like an extra year they could have given him. That it's
yeah.
like he'll get the max that year probably, so it's like not actually that much, but it's still somewhere north of 50 million at the very least, which is a lot of
Yeah.
money.
Well, that was like part of everybody was like, man, Luka looks shocked at like how, at his intro presser, people kept on saying, wow, Luka looks really kind of bummed to be there. And I'm like, he looks like somebody who just lost $100 million. That's how
Yeah,
I would look like. And so anyway, I do think that the market inefficiency here moving forward, and it runs antithetically to what was intended with these max contracts,
I love this take.
is that if you didn't draft a player and therefore can only pay that player less than the team that drafted him, you'll be able to trade for some of these really, really good players who may not be worth max contracts, but I think you'll be able to get really bleeping good players who are just a tier below being worthy of a max contract. And if you already have one of those max players, as the Lakers happen to have now, you can now pair your actual max player with somebody who is just slightly worse than a max player. And holy shit, now you're immediately a championship contender. And I think, and this is how it always goes. As you try to legislate parity,
Yes,
you always make it harder on the teams that you're trying to help, because that's exactly what's happening here.
I was gonna say, I just like, we could circle back to your point about how this helps the Lakers in a second, but the unintended consequences of this, and this does tie into how it helps the Lakers. It's very funny because you have all these owners, like among the richest, most successful people in their field. They're like, we got to get together and we got to make it so that it's easier for all of us to have equal teams every single year. And what we can't have is teams like the Lakers spending a whole bunch of money. So we need to artificially, and the Clippers and these coastal elitist teams spending all this money.
Yeah.
And when they already have the geographical advantages and all that. So what we need to do? We need to basically hard cap what they can spend. But what we're going to do? We're going to hard cap every team, so that even the ones that don't make as much money still, have these massive penalties for keeping their own guys. And then also, how do we keep guys from going to the Lakers? Well, what if we made their teams able to offer them $100 more million? Then they'd be able to keep them, right? The guys couldn't say no to that. And then the teams are like, well, wait, that's too much money. We can't afford that. We got to trade
operate
this guy to
under
the
the hard cap now.
Yeah.
Right. Wait a second. So you just, because again, like you said,
You're like,
everybody
I
now
love
has to
dropping
operate
rakes
under
for
here.
me to step on. I think this time it's not going to hit me in the face.
Well, here's where I'm not going to get political here. This is just basic economics. But you have these titans of industry who know this is a game system, by the way. You have so many billionaires now that own these teams, and they have benefited from the fact that they have more resources than everybody else. And then they all now they have to compete directly with each other. And what they're realizing is that, oh shit, that's right. It's really hard to operate and compete if I have less resources than everybody else. Meanwhile, they're telling everybody else, just pull yourself up by the bootstraps. We're doing great. And
then they show up to the owner meeting and they're like, Steve Ballmer has more money than me.
Exactly.
You have to redistribute his wealth to us.
Right. You know how hard it is to compete with the Lakers? They have the coast. They have great weather. Oh my God.
We should get some sort of handout for existing in less advantageous circumstances. Like some sort of revenue sharing to make all of our revenues more equal. Like we take it from the higher earners and we distribute it to the lesser earners.
It's perfect. Absolutely perfect. How they have, like, by way of competing against each other in professional sports, have basically given up the secret to everybody that actually,
what if we had some sort of money to ensure the welfare of all of us? It's
what if there was a central presiding entity that would make sure that everybody has equal opportunity at competing in this league? What would that maybe just maybe let's come up with a constitution, or let's come up with a document that would like indicate to everybody that we all should have equal chance at life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And some of us, if some of us just happen to be born into situations that are a little more advantageous to us.
In the case of the
some
Lakers,
of us
literally born.
Yeah, that's right. Like, some of us should maybe, I don't know, support others of us who are in less fortunate situations.
And meanwhile, like, if you like, it's like Tillman Fertitta and like these owners and whatever, they see no problem with this. But like, if you explain to them the concept of socialism, they like jump across the table and try to fight you.
Yeah, right. Well, like, because they were messing with their actual money.
Yeah, exactly.
Not this play toy that they have. All right. Anyway, let's move on from that before people pick up what we're actually saying.
From Anthony and Harrison's Capitalism Corner.
All right. So where I said this was going to help the Lakers is because they now have, statistically, one of those 5 to 10 guys who are definitely worth a max contract. Certainly the max that the Lakers can give him, even if Dallas didn't think he was worth the super duper max that he could have gotten in Dallas. But he's definitely worth the amount of money that the Lakers can give him. That, by the way, is why the Lakers, because now the Lakers are kind of in the same boat as far as like what they can offer compared to other teams. And that's why the Lakers immediately moved to trade for Mark Williams, who, by the way, I don't think they meant to keep. But anyway, so like they immediately moved to prove to Luka, look, we're for real. We will do whatever it takes to keep you here, because he is, and I 5-time first team All NBA, before the age of 25 or at the age of 25.
He's one of the only guys in the league on like a 5-time All NBA streak, and he's like basically the only one under 30.
And perennial MVP candidate. This guy like raced through the Oklahoma City Thunder. Like, he's just an incredible basketball player. And the Lakers now have him.
He beat the Timberwolves so bad that they traded for Julius Randle to avoid the tax.
Rudy Gobert may never be the same.
Yeah.
And
I
so
think he's still suffering.
So the Lakers now have their 1A. Luka will be their 1A for the next decade. And I think as these teams are going to look at their current 1As and be like, yeah, I think that guy's more of a 1B. And as some of these guys get,
God forbid,
or a 2,
you're not allowed to say that to them, but it's like, you're more of a 1B,
right.
It's not a second. It's not secondary. It's 1B.
Right.
And
so, but they're going to look internally. They're going to have some of these internal conversations, and they're going to look at the Ja Morants of the world, or Giannis as he ages, or, you could go through any number of these all-stars, all NBA type players, and their teams are going to have some of these tough conversations. And some of those tough conversations are going to land, especially as these players are still suffering the whiplash of realizing, shit, I'm not just going to get the max every year. Like,
you just saw what Jimmy Butler did when he realized it, and the Suns started freaking out so bad that they pissed off one of their only good players in Kevin Durant, because they're like, well, shit, I mean, Bradley Beal won't let us trade him. Do we have to trade KD?
Right.
Let's not ask him or talk to him about it first. Let's let him find out through the media. I think this will go great.
KD famously doesn't hold grudges and is not really all that online.
Yeah.
So the rest of the league are going to look at some of their again, current 1A players. They're going to get slotted down to 1B, 2, whatever we're going to slot them at. And the Lakers are going to have that opportunity to slide in there and get that player and now properly slot them into 1A, 1B, 2, whatever we want to call it. And they're going to be set